Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and welcome to another episode of Wheels of Fury Road to Glory, a high-octane Necromunda Underhive Racing Campaign inspired by the Wheels of Fury rule supplement from Games Workshop. Deep beneath the hive cities and across the radioactive ash waste, 10 outlaw racers risk everything in a brutal campaign of speed, sabotage, and survival. These aren't armies fighting for territory, they're desperate crews piloting heavily customized death machines through collapsing tunnels, toxic sump canals, ash waste highways, and riot-filled dome streets. Every race brings new upgrades, catastrophic wrecks, bitter rivalries, and legendary moments as drivers battle to become the undisputed Lord of the Road. So this is race number 2 of our campaign. This is the Sump Circuit. This is a race that is taken on the very bottom of the Underhive in the Sump Sea, and unfortunately for this race, not all of our racers will be participating in this one because racer number 10, which was the meat wagon, unfortunately that driver was actually put into recovery, so because of it, they will not be able to participate in this race. So 9 of the racers will actually be in this one, so the only question remains is, of these 9, who is going to win race number 2? So that being said, because this video is a little bit more of a deeper dive, I will put timestamps in the description box below so we can click and navigate to the part of the video that interests you the most. So that being said, let's go play some background music and show you the rosters for all the racers.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Alright, rev it up, Hive Scum. This is race number 2, the Sump Circuit. This is a racing loop scenario with one giant loop that the racers will act to race around the entire track. Deployment starts with the 10th place of the person who placed last in the last race, and then moving upward for the previous race. We basically have 2 different rows, is pretty much how we have. The first row for our very first lap consists of racers who automatically activate before the second row racers. Initiative will be determined by a D6 roll for the racers who are in the front row. The second race racers for the second row will also be determined by a D6 roll as well. Now, there are some special rules according to this battle report. So we have the sump sea sinking, which means that wrecked vehicles are removed from the tabletop, representing them sinking beneath the waves, making room for other vehicles. Track conditions, there are sump whirlpools. You'll notice this with some yellow dice scattered throughout the tabletop. If a racer comes within 6 inches of one of these markers, it must take a loss control test to represent the fact that this thing is trying to drag them directly to the bottom of the Sump Sea. Now, there's only one lap on this race because it's a massive track, and the victory conditions, of course, is to cross the finish line first. The rewards for this one, if you took part in the race, earn 25 credits as well as D6 experience points. First place actually earns 100 credits and 10 experience points. Second place earns 75 credits as well as 7 experience points. Third place earns 50 credits and 5 experience points. And of course, if you complete the race, you earn D6 times 10 credits as well as 3 experience points. And of course, if you manage to take out any racers out of action while you're racing around the track, you earn 50 credits and 5 experience points. And as you can see on this video, we have a beautiful layout of Commander Iron Major's beautiful terrain they made on this tabletop. As you can see, we have our track made out for the entire tabletop. There's a bunch of hive scum and gangers in the various areas on the walkways and as well as the buildings to watch the race and the carnage down below to witness to see if their racer will actually make it to the finish line. So now that we're done talking about the scenario rules, let's go and talk about deployment and get this race started. So located throughout the sump track, of course, you'll see these yellow dice. Looking back now, I realized it was a really bad location, a color to use for that, but that is the location of whirlpool number 1, followed by whirlpool number 2, which is located over there right on the other second half of the quarter of the track in that location. Whirlpool number 3 is at the midway point on the sump track. Whirlpool number 4 is on the 3rd, 4th of the track as well along the central spire. And finally, whirlpool number 5 is on the outside turn on the very last approach before hitting the finish line. Alright, so let's go and talk about deployment. So in the very first row, of course, we're going from the lowest placing racer from the previous lays up to the highest placing racer. So on the left-hand side there, we have the Omni Blaster, which is a Vansar Technica, followed by the War Rig there on its right-hand side. In the center is the Grudge Bearer. To its right is the Outlaw, and finally make up the very far right-hand side is Booster Gold, the heavy vehicle. And making up the second place row, right next to the finish line where those yellow fighters are located, that bridge where the yellow fighters are located on is going to represent the finish line on this race. On the far left, we have Roadkill, as well as the Blade Runner. We also have our last race champion, which is the Brimstone, who actually won the tunnel run. And then right next on the right-hand side is the Delac Wraith, known as the Knight Rider. And that's going to make up the deployments for this one. So with deployments over with, we go directly top of turn number 1, and my friends roll out for initiative to see which of us will be going first. So the top of turn number 1, Booster Gold, the Guild of Coin Hauler, is going to be the one going first, driving their custom rig as well, so they get to activate first. So for Booster Gold's very first activation, it just spends both of its actions moving up forward as quickly as possible. It is a heavy custom rig vehicle, so it's not very fast to begin with, and the last time that Booster Gold kind of stuck around the back of the finish line, it basically got blown apart. So he's looking for his last time, and he is rocketing forward on the outside turn, trying to get as far away from the rest of the fighters as possible. Up next, of course, the very next activation is Outlaw, which is the Paladin Ranger, who's piloting his custom medium vehicle. For his very first action, he's going to do a move and shoot action, basically firing his twin-linked concussion cannon directly at Booster Gold first, and then following through with movement afterwards. As you can see, the Paladin Ranger opens up with his dual-linked concussion cannons, opening by 3-inch blast templates directly towards Booster Gold. So let's talk about exactly what happens for the damage from that point onward. Alright, so the Outlaw is firing twin-linked concussion cannons with a 9-inch short range, so because he'll get the +1 to hit modifier for that short-range blast. He's also striking at strength 4 -1 AP, as well as 2 damage. The attack also comes with a 3-inch blast template. It also has concussion, knockback, as well as seismic, which is going to be all kinds of hell when it comes to doing handling tests for the vehicles, and of course it is also twin-linked. Now the Outlaw, of course, has a 3+ ballistic skill, but because he's striking at a short distance of +1, he gets +1 to hit, meaning he needs a 2 or higher in order to hit. As you can probably imagine, the Outlaw has no problem landing that hit with that twin-linked concussion cannon against Booster Gold. It is striking at a strength of 4 against Booster Gold's side toughness of 9, which means that the Outlaw needs a 6+ in order to wound. Now, unfortunately for the Outlaw, it does fail to wound, so because that, no damage is done to the vehicle. However, the real lethality of this weapon, of course, is not necessarily its damage, but the fact that it triggers handling tests for the fighters, and because of that, because it has concussion as well, the driver also suffers a -2 to their handling check for Booster Gold, which increases their handling check to 8+. Now, as weird as it may actually sound, Booster Gold actually managed to pass his handling test, so because of that, he's still okay, and no damage, no harm, no foul at this point. To make up for the remainder of his activation, Outlaw just kind of moves up forward 10.5 inches, rocking alongside and parallel to Booster Gold, trying to go as quickly as possible because, after all, this is a race. So the next vehicle to activate is the Grudge Bearer, of course, which is operated by a Ironhead Squad Prospector Gearhead. This vehicle actually got taken out the very first round of the previous race, so this one's actually looking to way to actually redeem itself in the Sump circuit. The Grudge Bearer's activation is pretty simple, doing double movements forward, and it does go directly into the very first Sump whirlpool because it's within 6 inches of that die. However, though, with a handling score of 7+, the Grudge Bearer manages to pass that handling test no problem, so continues on his way. The next one to activate is the Omni Blaster, which is the Vansar Technica, and basically he decides to do a move as well as shoot action directly against the Outlaw. As you can see, the Omni Blaster does have a line of sight directly towards the back end of the Outlaw, so decides to open fire with his weapon first before managing to move. So the Omni Blaster is equipped with a mining laser with an 18-inch short range as well as a 24-inch long range. Now you do suffer -1 to hit at a long range distance, but luckily for the Omni Blaster, he is firing at short range, so there is no hit penalty whatsoever. He is striking at strength 9 with -3 AP and 3 damage, however, and it's also got a 3+ ammo roll. And with a ballistic skill of 3+, the Omni Blaster needs to roll 3 or higher in order to hit its shot against the Outlaw. The hit is successful, so they're striking strength 9 against the side toughness of the Outlaw, which is toughness 5, and he's a 3+ order to wound. The Omni Blaster, of course, has no problem making that wound, and because that -3 AP, the Outlaw receives no armor save, so because of the vehicle suffers 3 damage. Which results in a catastrophic hit to the drive system, so because of the Outlaw's redundant drive system, however, does drop it down to a glancing hit, which is quite nice. However, though, the Outlaw must make a loss control test, though, because of that glancing hit, and with a handling of 5+, he needs to roll a 5 or higher on his 2d6 roll. And unfortunately, the Outlaw fails its handling test. Actually rolls a 4, just 1 below the handling requirement in order to maintain control. So because of that, the vehicle, of course, has to take a loss control test. It failed it, so they roll the direction dice to do this. And this is why our die, when it comes to the loss control dice, it is like cursed. I'm not sure what it is about it, but this thing rolls rollover more than any other directional dice we've ever seen. Very rarely does it roll jackknife or like just turned a little bit. So because of that, this vehicle flips over 1 inch to the forward direction, landing directly on its top. So with a violent spray of sump toxic goodness showering all the other racers, the outlaw of course rockets forward and flips directly forward, landing directly on the hardtop and exploding in a ball of flame and erupting smoke. And luckily, because this is taking place in the sump sea, the vehicle of course will sink directly to the bottom of the sump, clearing the way for the rest of the racers to make it through. So the Outlaw is the very first vehicle to get wrecked in this race. The driver actually rolled up out cold the results because that driver is perfectly fine, and when it came to its vehicle lasting damage, it rolled persistent rattling, which means the next time this vehicle gets wrecked, it has a roll of d6 adding 1 to the result, and it could potentially be a write-off depending how many persistent rattlings it actually has or if the roll is really high. And the Emily Blaster, of course, finishes out the rest of its movement allowance by moving forward 9 inches, carrying on with its movement shoot action with moving, and then doing another movement action, hugging the central spire of the sump track so that way it can get around the sump circuit and make it directly towards the finish line. So now that the first row of racers have activated, it's now down to the second row of racers to go next, and Brimstone, the Cawdor road preacher that drives the walking vehicle, gets to activate first. And for its very first activation, it does a basic action in order to drop a melt-a-mine and a rocket forward 6 inches to get away, so that way the blast will take out whatever racers are right next to it. So as you can see, the mine drops right between the Knight Rider as well as Blade Runner, and as you can see, Brimstone of course just rockets forward because he is not going to stick around to see exactly what ends up happening, and the melt-up trap goes off. A 5-inch blast template full of superheated plasma just erupts across the battlefield, catching both the Blade Runner as well as the Knight Rider directly into its blast radius. So let's go and talk about see what happens to the damage to these two vehicles. So the Melted Trap, it strikes at strength 8 with minus 4 AP and 3 damage. It's got a 5-inch blast template with the Melta special rule attached to it, as well as single shot. Now, of course, we have to roll d6 to see if both Blade Runner and Knight Rider activate the trap. Unfortunately, both of them do, so because of the explosion takes place, and both Blade Runner and as well as Knight Rider are both hit by the exploding blast radius. So starting off with the Blade Runner, it is being struck with a strength 8 attack against a side toughness of 5+, so because of that, basically the Brimstone has a roll of 3+ in order to wound. It does manage to get that wound no problem, and because of that minus 4 AP, the Blade Runner does not get an armor save and suffers 4 damage, usually 3, but they get 4 damage due to the melted weapon trait, which adds 1 more damage to vehicles. And unfortunately for the Knight Runner, exactly the same thing ends up happening, needing a 2+ in order to wound against the Knight Rider because of his side toughness of 3, because it is a light vehicle. Manages to wound, no armor save whatsoever for the light vehicle for the Knight Rider, and also suffers 4 damage as well due to the melted trait. Now, for the Blade Runner, it does suffer a catastrophic hit to the body, but the Blade Runner does have a Blade of Armor, which drops into a glancing hit, which results in crew shaken, so because of that, the Blade Runner must take a handling test. Unfortunately, with that minus 2 handling, it does actually suffer and doesn't actually manage to pass that test at all, so because it does become stationary and stalled. Unfortunately for the Knight Rider, it suffers a catastrophic hit to the body, which of course is going to eat up all of its hull points, which is going to cause this vehicle to explode. So with a thunder crack of an explosion in the depths of the sump sea, it explodes, rocketing forward a huge plume of toxic sump sludge as this thing explodes from the inside out from that melted trap, and unfortunately the Knight Rider has been eliminated from the race. To make matters worse for the Knight Rider, not only is it wrecked, but the driver suffers a critical injury, which means the driver will need to take a medical escort mission in order to see if the driver dies or not. And unfortunately, I don't believe the Knight Rider actually has any spare credits, so this could actually be really bad for the Knight Rider. Not to mention, because this vehicle already had a persistent rattle on it, when they rolled to see what happens to this vehicle, they rolled a 6, which means the vehicle becomes a write-off, which means they need to pay repair costs in order to bring the Knight Rider to participate in the next race. We'll see exactly what happens to the Knight Rider in the post-game. And as crazy as it may seem, this is actually all this wave of destruction was actually Brimstone's very first portion of its activation. It still has another set of actions it can actually take afterwards. So for its second set of actions, it decides to do a move and shoot action, moving up halfway and also firing its heavy flamer directly at Booster Gold. So the heavy flamer opens up with a sheet of flaming Promethean across the hull of the Booster Gold. It is a template attack, so it automatically hits. The strength's at strength 5 minus 2 AP as well as 1 damage. It also causes blaze. Now obviously it automatically hits because of this template attack, but luckily for Booster Gold though, it does have a side toughness of 9, so because of that, Brimstone will need a roll of 5+ or to wound. And as crazy as it may sound, a perfect 6 is rolled against the Booster Gold, so because of that, the vehicle is wounded. So a wound does go through, so Booster Gold does have to armor save with a 6+ order to save it. It fails its armor save, and to add insult to injury, it is also blazed as well. So the vehicle is currently on fire. And when they roll for the damage, it actually rolls up a penetrating hit to the engine, which means that what ends up happening is the vehicle suffers loss of power. It loses 1 hull point. At the same time, it can't move faster than its movement in any single phase, and it must take a loss of control test. Now, Booster Gold does have a handling of 6+. Unfortunately, though, when he rolls his 2d6 to see if he survives, he actually rolls a 3, so because of that, he fails that handling test. And dun dun dun, once again the die rolls a rollover and wrecks. It rolls over 3 inches to the right hand side because that rollover die, that thing is cursed, I swear. It always pulls up rollovers. That thing is absolutely terrifying to roll for my gaming group. So like a hunking burning of love, it decides to roll over and crash like a meteor directly into the building right next to it, exploding into a fireball of smoke as well as flames. Not to mention it causes tidal waves of sump fluid to flow all around it, and unfortunately Booster Gold is eliminated for the race. To make matters worse, of course, Booster Gold is not only wrecked, but the driver suffers a humiliating injury, losing 1 to their leadership as well as their crew going to recovery, which means that racer will not be able to participate in race number 3 of the campaign. At the same time, the vehicle also suffers a handling glitch, which is one less thing it needs to worry about, and actually suffers 1 to its handling characteristic as well. So things are not looking very good for the Gilded Coin hauler for Booster Gold. So the next vehicle to be activated is the War Rig, which is the heavy Goliath vehicle operated by the Goliath Rogue Thug. And the very first thing he decides to do is to do a move and shoot action against the Omni Blaster. As you can see, the War Rig does have line of sight with its twin-linked autocannons directly to the back of the Omni Blaster as well. It decides to open fire with its weapons first before it does this movement phase. So it is fired twin-linked autocannons with a 24-inch range. It strikes a strength 7 with -3 AP as well as 2 damage. It's got knockback as well as rapid fire 1, and it's also twin-linked. Just a whole bunch of pain. The War Rig is striking at ballistic skill 4+, so we'll need a 4+ order to hit against the Omni Blaster. So not only does the War Rig hit Omni Blaster with its autocannon, manage to strike twice directly against its hull, striking at strength 7 against a rear toughness of 4+, so because of that the War Rig needs to roll a 3+ order wound against the Omni Blaster. So both hits also wound as well, so because of that it does have that -3 AP, so the Omni Blaster does not get an armor save whatsoever, and it suffers 6 damage directly against itself. The result, of course, ends up being a penetrating hit to the engine, so because of that, the Omni Blaster does suffer loss of power. It loses 1 hull point and can't move faster than its movement in any single phase, which is absolutely horrible to have because you are in a race after all. And it must also take a loss control test as well. The Omni Blaster does have a handling of 7+, and it does manage to pass its handling test, so no harm, no foul there. However, the War Rig decides that it's not done messing with the Omni Blaster, decides to finish up its activation by moving up its movement allowance halfway to finish up its first action, and decides it does another simple movement action to go directly into the back of the Omni Blaster, getting it in a head-on collision as well, impacting the light vehicle right in front of it. So the head-on collision, of course, is striking at strength 9 -4 AP as well as 4 damage against the Omni Blaster, and this damage is actually increased because of the War Rig's ram that it actually has, and plus it's a heavier vehicle against a medium vehicle as well. So we're striking at strength 9 versus a rear toughness of 4, which means that the War Rig needs to roll a 2+ order to wound against the Omni Blaster. The wound is good, and unfortunately the Omni Blaster does not get an armor save because of that -4 AP, so it ends up getting 4 damage directly to the Vansar medium vehicle. The damage for this one actually results in a catastrophic hit to the drive, so because of that it goes directly into the Omni Blaster, and unfortunately ends up with this vehicle actually exploding because it lost its very last hull point, so because of that the Omni Blaster goes rocking directly into the side of the central spire of the sump circuit. It crashes into the wall and explodes in a ball of fire and smoke, and also spraying the audience with toxic goo from the sump sea, because this is Necromunda. We don't really worry about life expectancies here. So the Omni Blaster, of course, is wrecked. The driver gets an out cold result, so that was actually very lucky. Luckily, no lasting injuries were done to the driver, and the vehicle unfortunately loses a loss of power, which means it loses 1 to its movement characteristic as well. So that part is quite tragic. Now the crazy part is because it was a head-on collision, not a ram action, the War Rig actually does suffer damage in return. It suffers a strength 7 -2 AP, 2 damage hit against the War Rig. Now luckily for the War Rig though, it does have a front toughness of 7 against a strength of 7 ramming action. And of course it does wound, but the armor save is 6+. As weird as this sounds, the War Rig managed to save that wound, rolling a perfect 6. So the War Rig just does all of that and no negative to it, which is a really good action for the War Rig. So with all this crazy going all over the battlefield, Roadkill activates next. It does a civil movement in order to move up forward directly between both Brimstone as well as the Grudge Bearer. And it too also does a basic action to drop a melted trap right between the two vehicles, and also moves up forward its normal moon allowance as well, which is part of the drop a mine action that takes place when you use this. So right there, a melted trap is landing right between Brimstone as well as the Grudge Bearer. So a massive explosion erupts right in the middle of the sump sea, and it being a fireball of melted plasma as both the Brimstone as well as the Grudgebearer are hit by the melted trap. So once again, the melted trap is striking at strength 8 with -4 AP with 3 damage. It's got a 5-inch blast radius as well as the melted weapon trait and the single shot weapon trait as well. It is striking both Brimstone as well as the Grudgebearer. Now of course both of them roll a d6 to see if Brimstone and the Grudgebearer activate the trap. It doesn't really matter. I believe Brimstone activates the trap and the Grudgebearer does not, but it doesn't matter though because the Grudgebearer is still caught in the blast radius. So because of that, they're both engulfed with that melted trap. So starting off with the Brimstone. Brimstone is getting hit with a strength 8 attack against a side toughness of 4, so because of that, the roadkill needs to roll a 2+ in order to wound. Managed to wound no problem as well, and because of that -4 AP, Brimstone does not actually get an armor save. It suffers 4 damage as well due to the melted trait on that as well. And pretty much the exact same thing ends up happening with the Grudgebearer as well. Strength 8 against a rear toughness of 5 on this one, 3+ in order to wound. It does manage to slip that wound directly against the Grudgebearer. It doesn't get an armor save, and it also suffers 4 damage to the Melta as well. So starting out with Brimstone, it actually suffers a penetrating hit to the body, so it loses 1 hull point and must take a handling test. Now, the Brimstone actually, the custom walking vehicle has a handling of 4+, so because it passes no problem because that thing is the Pone. For the Grudgebearer, originally it suffered a catastrophic hit to the body, but due to the Grudgebearer's ablative armor, it drops it down to a glancing hit, which results in crew shaking, which means that the crew suffers a concussion, so because they have -2 to their handling test and must take a loss control test, that drops their handling score to a 9+. They also fail the handling test, but luckily for them though, they become stationary stalled because that's the result from the crew shaking result. So as you can see, the Grudgebearer is just kind of sitting there with that little serious injury die right behind it because it needs to be able to activate its engines and do a jump start before it can actually move forward. And speaking of jump starting, we go directly to the Blade Runner. The very first thing the Blade Runner needs to do, of course, is to do a jump start action with a 6+ to its handling test, and it passes that test no problem whatsoever. And for its second activation, decides to do a move and shoot action directly against Brimstone, deciding to open fire first before actually moving forward. The Blade Runner is opening up a twin-linked plasma guns using the low setting on that one, giving it a 12-inch short range. So because of that, the Blade Runner will receive 2+ in order to hit because of the short range modifier. It is striking at strength 5 -1 AP. It causes 2 damage. It's got a 5+ ammo roll with rapid fire 1, scarce, as well as the twin-linked weapon traits as well. Now the Blade Runner does have a ballistic skill of 3+, and they receive a 2+ in order to hit for short range, which means they have to basically roll a 1 or higher in order to hit. The Blade Runner manages to put 2 hits directly into the back of the Brimstone as well, so it is striking at strength 5 versus a rear toughness of 4, so because of that the Blade Runner need to roll a 3+ in order to wound. The wounds are good and manage to wound the Brimstone twice. Because the Brimstone does have an armor save of 6+, it does drop because of that -1 AP. Unfortunately for Brimstone though, it fails both of its armor saves, suffering 4 damage. And once again, the damage from that actually results in a penetrating hit to the body. It loses 1 hull point, so because that Brimstone only has 1 hull point left. It also makes a handling test, and with that handling of 4+, it does manage to pass, so right now the Brimstone is perfectly fine. And that takes us directly to the end phase of turn number 1 for the race within the Sump Circuit. Very action-packed race right off the bat. We had several vehicles being eliminated right off the bat in the very first turn of the Sump Circuit. Everyone's kind of making it to the first quarter of the race. And here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the tabletop as you see the racers are making their way beyond that very first bridge gateway there, trying to make their way to the first quarter of the race. And of course we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and once again the racers roll off for initiative to see which of them will be going first. So we can do with normal activations this time, and the Grudgebearer is actually the very first to activate, and the very first thing it has to do, of course, is to make sure it does jump start its engines. And that's exactly what the Grudgebearer does. Imagine jump starts its engine successfully with a successful handling test. It also moves up its maximum loot allowance just forward around that turn, just because it wants to be able to participate in the race. Roadkill activates next. It decides to do a move and shoot action against Brimstone using that all-around arc for its grenade launcher, firing directly behind it at Brimstone. The grenade launcher is firing a crack grenade directly at Brimstone with a 6-inch short range. -1 hit short range, so unfortunately that's going to activate 4 roadkills. It's going to lose 1 to its ballistic skill. However, though, it is striking at strength 6 with -2 AP as well as 2 damage. Now, roadkill does have a ballistic skill of 4+, but it loses 1 because of the short range modifier, so because it needs to roll 5+ in order to hit. The hit is good, so high explosive charge goes hitting directly against the hull of Brimstone, striking at strength 6 versus the front toughness of 4, so because of that, roadkill only roll 3+ in order to wound. The wound is good, and unfortunately for Brimstone, does not get an armor save because of that -2 AP from the crack grenade, so because that does suffer 2 damage directly against the vehicle. The damage on this one once again ends up being another penetrating shot to the body, which eats up the very last of its hull points, which of course causes Brimstone to explode. So with a scream of righteous fury, Brimstone prays the Emperor as his walking rig explodes right in the middle of the racetrack, sinking beneath the depths of the Sump Sea and also engulfing it in a ball of flame and smoke. Luckily for the driver, though, it goes into convalescence, so it does go into recovery, which is kind of unfortunate for Brimstone because, yes, it doesn't suffer any lasting injuries, but it will not be able to participate in race number 3 as the driver is currently in recovery. Not to mention, the vehicle also suffered damaged bodywork, which drops its toughness down by another point, which is quite bad because it is a walker vehicle, so it is already fragile to begin with. For the remainder of his activation, Roadkill moves at 10.5 inches forward, paralleling alongside the Grudge Bearer, doing a simple action to move forward and also using the half of his movement allowance for its move and shoot action against Brimstone. The next vehicle to activate is the Blade Runner, so the Escher Hellion decides to actually do a simple move action forward before it makes its next attack. The Blade Runner's simple movement parallels it right next to the War Rig, where it decides to do a basic action to once again do another mine-laying action. As you can see, the Melter Trap does drop right behind the Escher Hellion for the Blade Runner, landing right next to the stump of the girder there, as well as right next to the War Rig. And the Blade Runner rockets forward with another movement allowance in order to get right behind the Grudge Bearer as the Melter Trap explodes in a ball of fire, a 5-inch blast template right next to the War Rig. So once again, the Melta Trap, striking at strength 8 minus 4 AP with 3 damage, blast 5-inch radius with a Melta trait as well as a single shot trait, and once again the War Rig does trigger the trap. It is striking at strength 8 against a side toughness of 7, which means the Blade Runner needs to roll 3+ in order to wound. The wound is good, and to add more tragedy to this whole story, the War Rig does not get an armor save whatsoever because of that minus 4 AP, so it suffered 4 damage directly against itself because of that additional wound caused by, additional damage rather, caused by the Melta trait. And in the end, this ends up being a catastrophic hit to the engine, creating belching smoke and flame, so there's -2 to its hull points, so it drops it 2 hull points, and it can't move faster than 7 inches in its activation and must make a handling test with a -1 modifier. This drops the War Rig to a handling of 8+, and unfortunately the War Rig does fail its handling test. And can you guess what happens to this vehicle? That's right, if you guessed it rolled over, that's exactly what ends up happening because that rollover marker pops up all the time in that die. That thing is cursed by, I'm not sure if it's the Chaos Gods or the Emperor himself, but this thing causes all kinds of damage. It flips forward, flips over straight ahead 1 inch. So with a blood-curdling scream, the War Rig flips over and explodes in a fireball of smoke, scrap metal, as well as destruction as the vehicle slowly sinks beneath the Sump Sea, clearing the way for other racers. To make matters worse for the War Rig, not only is it wrecked, but the driver also suffers a critical injury, which means they must do a medical escort mission or die. Now, luckily for the War Rig, I believe it does have about 90 credits in its stash, so because it could pay for a medical escort mission, unlike the Knight Rider, and also to add insult to injury, the vehicle loses a loss of power, which makes sense because the catastrophic hit to the engine, which means that it loses 1 to its movement allowance if it manages to go back to its next race. And with that dramatic display of violence taking place on the tabletop, that takes us directly to the end phase. And as you can see, we originally started with 9 racers. The very first half of this race was all kinds of violence. We're now down to 3, which is the Blade Runner, the Grudge Bearer, as well as Roadkill. And the crazy part about this, we're actually at the end of turn number 2, and we haven't even reached the midway point of the Sump circuit. They still have a whole other, I think, about 2/3 of the race to go still. So that part is incredibly insane. So that being said, we go directly to the top of turn number 3, and my friends roll for initiative to see which of us will be going first. Alright, so with that we go directly to the top of turn number 3, and the Blade Runner managed to get the initiative on this one, so because of that, the very first action that the Blade Runner decides to do is a move and shoot action against Roadkill. So Blade Runner turns slightly in order to face directly to the back arc of the Roadkill and decides to open up with her twin-linked plasma guns, doing a move and shoot action at the same time. So she's firing her twin-linked plasma guns at max setting with a 12-inch short range, getting +1 hit at the short range modifier as well. She can be striking at strength 7 with -2 AP, 3 damage, as well as the scarce, twin-linked, and unstable special weapons trait. So unfortunately, if she rolls an ammo roll on that one, she could potentially kill herself. With a Blizzard skill of 3+, she needs to roll with +1 modifier for short range. She rolls a 2+ in order to hit her target. Luckily for the Blade Runner, does manage to land a shot off directly to the back arc of the Roadkill. No ammo roll was needed, absolutely, so that part was excellent. She is striking at strength 7 versus a rear toughness value of 5, so because of that she needs to roll 3+ in order to wound. So it does manage to successfully wound against Roadkill. Roadkill has a modified armor save of 6+ after the -2 AP from the maximum setting on the plasma gun, and unfortunately for Roadkill, it fails its armor save and also suffers 3 damage. The end damage ended up being a penetrating shot to the crew, which means they have driver wounded, which means the driver does suffer a flesh wound, so because of that they will lose 1 to the ballistic skill as well as to the handling characteristic for the rest of the battle report. So with the combined movement from her half movement allowance from her move and shoot, as well as a full simple action, she moves at 10.5 inches directly towards that rubble pile on the top half of the battlefield. So Roadkill activates next and decides to do a move and shoot action against Blade Runner, opening fire with their grenade launcher, firing a crack grenade directly towards the Blade Runner. Unfortunately, when firing that crack grenade launcher with the -1 to hit at the short range, in combination with the -1 to hit from their Ballista skill because of the flesh wound, ended up being a 6+ to hit, so because of that, Roadkill does completely miss a shot, so because of that, they don't really do much of anything. So for the remainder of the turn, Roadkill actually moves up another 10.5 inches, using the combination of the move and shoot action as well as a simple action to go around the other side of that rubble pile as well. So then we go over there to the very end to the Grudge Bearer. The Grudge Bearer decides to do another move and shoot action as well, moving up forward 3 inches underneath that pass. That way it's got a good line of sight directly against Blade Runner. As you can see, the Grudge Bearer does move forward 3 inches directly beneath that little bridge area, so it's got a good line of sight directly towards the Blade Runner, and decides to open up with its melta guns. And this is where the sparks start flying, because the Grudge Bearer is actually equipped with twin-linked melta guns with a 6-inch short range as well as 12-inch long range. They're going to get the +1 to hit for the short range modifier, striking at strength 8 -4 AP and 3 damage. They do have a 5+ ammo roll as well as the melta, scarce, and twin-linked weapon traits as well. Now the Grudge Bearer does have Ballista skill 4+, but with that +1 to hit due to the short range modifier, it's going to be a 3+ in order to hit. The shot accurately hits against the side of the Blade Runner, so because they're striking at strength 8 versus a side toughness of 5, ends up being a 3+ in order to wound. The Grudge Bearer have no problem whatsoever making that wound roll, so because of that, it does wound against Blade Runner. They do have no armor save because of that -4 AP for that modifier, so because of that, the Blade Runner actually takes 4 damage due to the melta weapon trait. The damage being done is a catastrophic hit to the body, because that leads to what's called the weapon destroyed special rule. It takes 2 hull points off of Blade Runner, so because that Blade Runner only has 1 hull point left, at the same time they lose their twin-linked plasma guns as well and must take a loss of control test. Now luckily for the Blade Runner though, she does have a handling of 7+, but unfortunately though she fails that, and she also wrecks. Once again, that horrid rollover die pops up again on the movement dice, so because that she is going to go out of control and also explode. So with a death shriek that could wake the dead, she goes barreling directly into that rubble pile and explodes in a fireball of shrapnel as well as flames, as bits and pieces of her vehicle go flying everywhere and slowly sinks directly into the depths of the Sump Sea. In the end, she is actually wrecked, of course. The driver suffers a head injury, so because she loses 1 to her intelligence as well as 1 to her willpower as well, as she goes into recovery, meaning that she will miss out on race number 3 of this campaign while she recovers. To make matters worse, of course, the vehicle also has loss of power for its lasting damage to the vehicle, so because it loses 1 to its movement characteristic. For the rest of its movement allowance, the Grudge Bearer does a simple movement forward, moving up 6 inches directly next to that rubble pile, making its way directly to right past the paralleling the Roadkill, as also taking the point as well. So that takes directly to the end of turn number 3, and as you can see, the fighters are kind of obscured from the central axis terminal right in the middle of the battlefield. They're basically at the midway point of the race, so because that, we go directly to the top of turn number 4, once again, where our friends roll off for initiative to see which of us will be going first. So with that, we go directly to the top of turn number 4, and Roadkill decides to be activated first for this round and decides to do a full throttle action in order to move forward. Now, the original plan, of course, was to move forward 21 inches. However, though, when you do a full throttle activation, it's a double action. You can go triple your movement allowance, but if you have to make any turns, you have to take a handling test. And with a 7+ with handling, it was kind of conceivable to be doable. And they were trying to go around that first reap rubble right there on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, the Roadkill did actually fail its handling test. We had to roll the handling dice, and as weird as it may sound, it actually ended up being a jackknife for the first time ever on that die. So because of that, Roadkill does lose control, jackknifes 90 degrees to the left, so because that is now stranded right there and is currently stationary and stalled, which could have been a lot worse because it could have just rolled over, because that's what usually happens on that die. So moving on to our second and very last racer that's on this turn, we go to Grudge Bearer, and once again the Grudge Bearer decides to do a move and shoot action against Roadkill. So the Grudge Bearer, of course, terminal force 3 inches directly towards the side arc of Roadkill and decides to open fire with his twin-linked melta gun directly at the medium vehicle. So once again, this weapon is firing a twin-linked melta gun with a 6-inch short range, and they'll be able to well within that short range modifier with a +1 to hit, striking at strength 8 with -4 AP, 3 damage, as well as a 5+ ammo roll with the melta, scarce, and twin-linked weapon traits attached to it. Now the Grudge Bearer, of course, has a Ballista skill 4+, with that +1 hit modifier, actually drops down to 3+ in order to land a shot directly against Roadkill. Does manage to hit, but also managed to trigger an ammo test as well, but luckily the twin-linked weapon trait on the melta gun cancels that out, so they are striking at strength 8 against a side toughness of 5, requiring a 3+ in order to wound. The wound is good, and unfortunately for the roadkill, it doesn't actually get an armor save because of that -4 AP modifier. So because it does suffer 4 damage due to the melta weapon trait directly against the vehicle itself. So the damage done onto the roadkill is a catastrophic hit to the crew. Once again, the driver gets wounded with another flesh wound, dropping the ballistic skill to a 6+, as well as losing another point to their handling characteristic. And unfortunately, the driver does black out, as represented by that serious injury die right next to the roadkill. So because of this character takes another flesh wound, of course, they will go out of action. And for the rest of the activation leading up to the end phase, the Grudge Bear moves up another 6 inches. It does go past one of the sump whirlpools, but it passes its handling test no problem, so there's no harm and no foul there. And with that, that takes directly to the end of turn number 4. As you can see, there's only 2 racers left, which is Roadkill as well as the Grudge Bearer. The Grudge Bearer, of course, does have the lead on that one. They're entering the very last turn of the race. As you see that bridge there with the yellow fighter standing on top of it, that is actually the finish line for this race. So whoever manages to cross that line will be the winner of race number 2. So because of that, we go directly to the top of turn number 5, and my friends and I roll off for initiative to see which of us will be going first. So we go directly to the top of turn number 5, and once again, Roadkill gets activated first. However, though, the problem, though, is that the driver is still blacked out. They can't take any actions at all during this turn. So because of that, the Grudge Bearer is activated next, and the Grudge Bearer, of course, decides to do double movement forward in order to cross the finish line. As you see, it goes back that last little bit of that sump whirlpool token, manages to pass its handling test no problem, and also cross the finish line at first, also winning the very first victory for itself, as well as the overall winner for race number 2, the Sump Circuit. So the Hive Scum go wild, opening fire with wild cheers and shooting guns and explosives up in the air, because now is the end of the race for the Sump Circuit, which is race number 2 of our Wheels for Fury campaign. And the Grudge Bearer managed to win this race for this one. So that being said, we're going to go directly to the post game, because this battle report is now officially over.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
So now it's time for the post-game. This is part of the battle report. We talk about what went well, what went poorly, what we can learn for the next time that we do battle. This is the after-action report for Necromunda Wheels of Fury Underhive Racing Campaign, battle report number 2, the Sump Circuit. And I do apologize for my very first battle report. I forgot to do the post-game for race number 1, so I do apologize for that. I've been kind of out of whack for the last 3 months, not being making battle reports, so I do apologize for that one. But I'm making up for this one. So, race number 1, Roadkill managed to earn 200 credits from this race by finishing 2nd place, as well as earning 19 experience points. For their advancements, they learned the heavy foot skill, and at the same time got +1 to their ballistic skill, as well as +1 to their cool. Race number 2, the Blade Runner, unfortunately got 75 credits as well as 8 experience points, but they won't be able to participate in their next race because of a head injury, so they lose 1 to their intelligence as well as 1 to the willpower. And at the same time, the vehicle also suffered a loss of power, so as -1 to its movement characteristics. For advancements, however, though, it did get +1 cool as well as +1 willpower, to help kind of balance out a little bit from that head injury it suffered. Race number 3, the War Rig, unfortunately has been eliminated from the tournament. It is no longer participating for the rest of the campaign because they did suffer a critical injury. Here's the really messed up part though. The War Rig spent 80 credits from his stash in order to go to the medical escort mission, but when they rolled up to see exactly what happened to him, they rolled a 1, which basically means the fighter died. So because the driver is dead, the vehicle is now KIA as well, so it's been eliminated from the roster. So now we are now down a racer for the rest of the campaign. So race number 4, Brimstone, also earned 125 credits from this race as well as 16 experience points, and for injuries it suffered convalescence. So because of that, the driver of the Brimstone will not be able to participate in the next battle report because it will be recovery. Also, the vehicle was also wrecked as well and it suffered damage to its bodywork, losing 1 point of toughness from all of its characteristics. Now from their advancements, they learned the T-Bone skill as well as earned +1 to their ballista skill, and at the trading post they did negotiate repairs for the vehicle at 60 credits and removed the damaged bodywork away from the Brimstone, so now it kind of canceled out against the long-term damage it suffered. Racer number 5, the Omni Blaster, earned 75 credits as well as 11 experience points. Now for the injuries for the driver, they did suffer an out cold result, so because they make a full recovery, so no harm, no foul there. But the vehicle was wrecked. It did suffer loss of power, which means it loses 1 to its movement characteristics. Now for the advancements, the Omni Blaster earned +1 to his ballista skill as well as rolled up the slalom skill, so managed to roll up one of his random skills for his driving skill. And for its trading post, it also spent 100 credits to negotiate repairs, getting persistent rattle instead. So because of that, the loss of power has been removed, but now has the persistent rattle instead for that blasting injury. So race number 6, the Knight Rider, has also been eliminated from the tournament because just like the American healthcare system, race number 6, Knight Rider cannot pay for the medical escort mission because it had no money. So because of that, character did die. So because of that, is eliminated from the roster as well as from the rest of the campaign too. And to make matters worse, the vehicle also was wrecked with a write-off result because of that persistent rattle. So even if they did have the money to pay for the critical injury, they didn't have enough money in order to pay off for their vehicle to be repaired. So just debt all around, unfortunately. Racer number 7, the Grudge Bearer, was the winner of race number 2 for the Sump circuit, so because of that he earned 225 credits as well as 23 experience points. For his advancements, he chose the Munitorium skill because that's how many experience points he had, as well as decided to choose the T-Bone skill for himself as well, and increase his ballistic skill by 1 point as well. For the trading post, he spent 45 credits for the all-around firing arc for their twin-linked melta guns, and decided to put the rest of the credits directly in their stash after witnessing fighters dying from lack of healthcare coverage, as well as insurance for repairing their vehicles. Racer number 8, Booster Gold, earned 25 credits as well as 6 experience points. Unfortunately, though, the fighter did suffer a humiliating injury, so they lost 1 to leadership as well as a cool characteristic, and they go into recovery. So unfortunately, Booster Gold will miss out on the next race as they're in recovery for that one. At the same time, the vehicle also suffering a handling glitch, so it loses 1 to its handling characteristic. And finally, racer number 9, Outlaw, earned 25 credits as well as 2 experience points. However, though, for injuries, the driver did suffer an out cold result, so he makes a full recovery, so no harm, no foul there. Unfortunately, the vehicle did get wrecked because it does have the persistent rattle lasting damage on it, so it could prove to be catastrophic later on, especially if the vehicle gets wrecked again. And that pretty much makes up the post-battle sequence for all the racers for this campaign thus far. So there you guys have it. Race number 2, the Sump circuit, has been concluded. Up next is race number 3. It's called Mario's Market Mayhem. So I'll let you guys guess what kind of game mechanics going to be inside of that race as well. Unfortunately, 2 races were eliminated from the campaign in this one single race, because that kind of shows you how deadly these Underhive races can actually be as well. And don't forget, race number 10, the Meat Wagon, which is the corpse grinder road initiate, he was able to participate in this race because he suffered a lasting injury that put him in recovery from the last game, but he will be around for race number 3, so that part will be quite exciting. So, who do you think is going to win the next race? Go ahead and put down your thoughts down in the comments box. Who do you think is going to end up winning race number 3, and who do you think overall is going to win the campaign overall? I'd love to hear you guys' theories, and we'll see exactly if you guys are right or not. I feel like we should be taking bets with credits or something like they would do in the Underhive. Anyways, that's good for this battle report. I am Commander Cheapskate. I will catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.